Guys, just a quick refresher. We finished off last video. We were using our express routing to give some dynamic data to our backend and save that data to our Turbo data store. So just as a very quick refresher, we threw in some request parameters in our URL routes and kind of used that to just a quick and dirty way to create some objects. So we gave a name, city, and state param. And we used turbo create to create those objects. And if you go to our data store here, let's see. Sorry, I just gotta move this for a second. And here you go. We created these three building models. And just as a quick refresher on our, this is kind of our data model we're going with. These buildings are going to have many apartments. So what we're going to do is create a quick page for each building. And using this URL here, we're going to dynamically fetch and render that building. And then in that page, we're going to give a form and kind of go over the proper way to create more objects. And we're going to make sure that when we create these buildings, the apartments, they belong to the building. There's like a relationship there. So what we're going to do is using kind of some data that we know of when we render, like each building is going to have a URL and have some data. So we're going to do it so it automatically gets linked and it's related to the proper building. So, and again, if you haven't done too much work with any kind of database or anything, this is called a one-to-many relationship, or like belongs to. So the building has many apartments, and the apartments belong to a building. And what we're going to do is, I was just looking before, I don't know if you saw I had some tabs open here. I was trying to decide if we should do, I guess, how we want to create them. And I'm going to go do the old school HTML form. No JavaScript. We're just posting to an endpoint, and then on our end, we're going to get that post and do something with the data. So first up, we have our views directory here with some partials, and we have this index. I'm going to just copy the entire index because I want to reuse the head, the nav, all these partials. So I'm going to copy this whole thing, and I'm going to create a file called building.mustache. And I'm going to paste this whole thing in here. And I'm going to get rid of most of it. I just kind of want to keep the footer, the scripts, the header, the nav. And I think if you go to this main container, keep that. I'm going to get rid of these sections. You should just have head, nav, main container, etc. And we also have to start our server. And again, I say in every video just because people might be starting in the middle. Make sure you have Turbo CLI installed. And Webpack. Actually, this year's we're not even going to get to using Webpack, but there's some dependencies with Turbo and Webpack later on if you get into some React stuff. But I think for actually our purpose, it's not even relevant. But you do need Turbo CLI, and that will let you run Turbo Dev Server. And we created this view, but we don't have any way to access it. So what we're going to do is go to our index file, and all right, first we accidentally lost our home page, so we need to return that. And home page was, we were rendering those buildings. So let's do that. Actually, I just created all these buildings. Now let's render them on the home page. So we're gonna do turbo fetch building is the resource name. No query parameters. Sorry. Then we're gonna have these buildings back. Res.render, and we're gonna render our index. And we're gonna pass in these buildings. And this should render our home page. I don't think the data is going to flow through because we changed from our original model. So just to fix that real quick, let's go back to our index. And container. Oh, so availability. I'm just going to change the name of this to building. Small. And in here, where we have this lead, I'm just going to get rid of that. We'll try this real quick. Title, is that what I called it? So I have name, city, state. And I have not done any front end work in quite a while, so bear with me. Sorry guys, been doing mostly mobile lately. I forget HTML sometimes. It's kind of funny. Alright, there we go. So this is just a space character. I was missing the semicolon here. And let's just see how that name city state looks. Again, to jump back to our index, I have to call this building small. And let's refresh our page. And look, so that's dynamic. That's all from our backend now. So that's neat. Styling's not great. Just gonna make these a little smaller for now. That's fine. I want to make this whole thing clickable. So you see here we gave it this link someplace and we click it and it goes nowhere. So based on what we've been doing with kind of passing these params to our Express server, you could probably kind of guess what the plan is here. So this here is going to be our slug. And what we're going to do is right here, instead of saying slash someplace, let's just pass in this whole name here. Let's try that. And again, if this doesn't work, just bear with me for a second. Slight adjusting of some of this syntax stuff when you haven't done it in a while. Mustache. Let's try that. Okay, so this is what we want now. So we're going to the route, and it looks fine. And I'd probably prefer dashes. So what I'm actually going to do is see if I could add a property here. I don't think we can. Basically, the way that it's showing here on the link is not really kind of have usually like that. It looks like a what like how we have it currently showing looks like a query param. It's kind of ugly. Definitely not good for SEO. We want it more like that, like a slug. So what I'm gonna have to do is create slugs on these, and I think you can actually, there's a turbo edit function. So let me just look real quick at our docs. edit object, entity, oh, update. Okay, so we just want to update these real quick with the slugs, and I'm just going to do it really quick. I'm going to go to back to our dashboard right here, and I'm going to try to just write one quick function to do it. So comment this out, and it's going to be turbo.update entity, and it's going to be building. We got to pass in the ID. So if I come back to our data store here, or here, we got our ID, and what do we want to add? So it's going to be called slug, and I'm going to call it, so for this one we want to do just lowercase, dashes, no space. Alright, so if I refresh this page, I'm not even checking to see if we're rendering anything or returning. I'm just quick, dirty updating this stuff. So let's come back to our data store, building. Alright, now we have our slug. So I'm going to do this 2 more times real quick. Hoffman N189. So I'm going to save this, refresh this, refresh this. Alright, and we got one more to update quick. Refresh. Again, nothing's happening here because we're not rendering anything or sending anything, which is why it's just hanging up. It's just stuck in that function. It said I created it, and what am I supposed to do? And it's just stuck there. But it created our object. So just one more time. Data store, building. All right, there we go. So we have our slugs, and let's jump back here, and I'm going to just undo back to when we were rendering our index. A little detour. Save that, and now if we jump back here, I should be able to just throw in the slug. So we pass in this the path here, so that's the root of our server, and then this bracket slug should pass our slug in. But let's find out. Localhost 3000. There's our slug. Nice. It cannot get that route because we have not defined it. So what we need to do is come back here. And again, I'm going a little faster because last video we kind of went slow, went over all this. I'm trying to build on that. And we're going to pass a get right here. That's going to, and remember the colon, it's a variable. It's going to say building slug. And what we're going to do is turbo fetch 1. Let me get rid of this. And I believe the building. And again, let's just check the docs. Fetch 1 resource name and ID. Okay, so okay, so now we want to fetch all buildings that meet our parameter of our slug, because that's the only thing we know available. So if we were using the ID in the parameter, sorry, my phone is ringing. If we were using the ID here, we could use that to fetch, but we're using a slug, so we're going to have to use as a query parameter. Again, we went over in the last video. So we're going to say fetch all buildings by slug, and it's going to be rec.params .building slug, and building. So the caveat here is we're assuming that we only have one building for each slug, which we're not really enforcing uniqueness anywhere, but we're creating our own data. That's fine. That's something you can you could do in wherever you create your buildings. If you're doing it dynamically, check to make sure none exist yet, then create it. But for us, we're fine. So this acts as a fetch 1 as long as we only have one slug. If not, everything breaks, but I think we'll be okay for now. Okay. And all I want to do here is log the data. So right here, we successfully fetched our building. So what we want to do now is similar to here. We want to insert that into our building. So, by the way, these errors here, I think we should probably redirect to like an error page, but one thing at a time. So here I'm going to do res.render. What did I call it? Building. And we're going to pass in our data. I mean, I should really call this building. And it's in an array here. So this is actually how we could deal with our multiple slug problem. Let's say there's another created by accident. We need to pass in just the first object. So we're going to pass in here building sub 0. Or I guess this should technically be buildings because it's an array. Doesn't matter, just naming preference. And we're only passing in the first object. Alright, let's go back to our building page here where we have nothing rendering. And let's just here, just for fun, say name, city, state, um, I'm assuming I have some kind of syntax error here. 1 second. All right, so we need to reference that data key which I gave it, and if I just jump back here, this is already a JSON object, so maybe we don't even want to give a key. Just pass in the building object itself, and then if we come back here to our mustache file. All right, so we accidentally had an extra key on that data key, which is why I wasn't rendering. But let's just go back home for a second and watch this. So here's our 3 buildings, right? And we gave them, if you remember, that slug. So just when we go to this home page here, we're fetching all the buildings and rendering them. And on each building, when we render it, we're passing this information, and now we're saying let's take that dynamic slug and put it here. Now when we click this slug here, or and 187th, that gets sent to our express route here where it matches, right? We have a variable here, building slug, which matches, and then this says, all right, fetch that whole building and provide that data to our next view, and then here we're rendering that data. So each one of these is a page now. We only have one template to maintain, so that's perfect. So we're going to style that out later, which is the fun part, but so it can actually come together. But for now, I want to kind of keep going what we've been building on, and we're going to make a form. So an old school boring form. So on the form here, we're going to have a we need an action, which is where we're gonna what the form's going to do, and a method, which for us is going to be a post. So the action is where we want to send, what endpoint we want to send to, and we're going to just send to post to our self, which should be, should be that. So this here, when we click that link, that's a GET request. But anything you do in the browser is a GET. So we click that, we went to this endpoint. So here we go. And now here on this form, we want to post. We want to send something. Now, what we were doing in the last video, we were kind of putting the params into our GET string and doing it. You can submit a form with a GET. That's why I was just saying it's not best practice. We really wanted to have it in a post. That's literally the same exact idea. Like, you're doing the exact same thing. It's just this is the better way to do it. So instead of submitting it in that URL string, it has a different HTTP method and some different semantics with that. But anyway, so what we're going to do here is post, again, dynamically to our building. So with this slug, we can kind of post to our specific building. I'm actually going to use the ID here. You'll see why in a second. I'll just leave this for now. We might change it. And I have a form. We need a button to submit. And okay, input. These are all going to be text. And I'm going to have some names. And the names of these inputs are going to be what we did over here. Num bed, num bath, num bed, num bath, availability, price, and description, and just give them a placeholder quick of the exact same, just so we can see which is which. These should all be self-closing. All right, let's take a look. So this button's ridiculous looking, but maybe it's label. Cannot post. Sorry. What? Very embarrassing to forget how to label a button in HTML. There we go. Okay. I know it sounds crazy, but it'll happen to you guys. You switch from one thing to another, and then like it takes like a day to remember how to do anything. Okay, so on the button that we're in the going to be in our HTML tags, and just to refresh. Let's get back to our page. All right, so basically what we did is we created a form, and the form wraps these 5 inputs. And when we hit this create apartment method, we're telling it post to the route of our slug. So as you can see, we get an error, cannot post to this endpoint. And that's because on our server, we don't have it working. So what we need to do is create a post handler. And it's going to be the same syntax as here. Building slug. You know what? I'll just keep it slug for now. You'll see in a second my original hold up. And all I want to do here is rec.body. So here, before we're doing, rec.params or rec.query, if it's a post, it's the request body is what you want. And all right, maybe it's router.post. So okay, let's try that again. It's all just junk. I want to see if it works. And look, right here it works. So again, everything in that body of that form we access as rec.body. But it's all the same idea of what we were doing before. And just to reiterate, let's just do console.log rec.params.building slug. And I'm going to refresh this. If we check our thing down here, we have our slug, or our 187th. This is the apartment information we want. So what do you think we should do in this handler? What we can do is create the object on the back end. And again, this is the proper way to do it. You typically want to create stuff in a post via form or Ajax, some other XMTP library. Okay, so we're going to do turbo.create. But the turbo.create, this is the interesting thing. So how are we going to make the relationship between the building and the apartments? Because later, let's say I want to see all the apartments for the building. How am I going to fetch them? I need to fetch by some attribute. And usually how it works is you want to usually fetch and link things by their IDs, like some unique property. We could use the slug, but just it's best to use our ID because those are unique, right? So our apartments have to belong to a single building, right? An apartment can't be in two buildings. So that's why we use the unique ID. And again, we're treating the slug like it was unique before just to for our purposes, but it's not, and we really should be using our ID. So what we're going to do here is we now need to fetch the actual building. So same as we did here, right? So when we post to this endpoint, we have this building slug and this body of the new apartment. So turbo.fetch, then we know that we're going to get back a single building, right? So here we have res.render. We're not rendering yet. So this is our next promise. We're going to return. So this is what we call a promise chain. So we're creating another promise. We're going to have another then. And so what we do is we say find the building, and then we're going to create, it's going to be called an apartment. And what we want to do is we can't just pass in the whole rec.body, right? So this is our rec.body, num beds, num bath, availability. because we're missing one thing. We need to link it to this item. So we have to insert another data attribute. So we're going to say let param equal rec.body, and then we're going to say params.building equals, and in here, after we fetch the buildings, it's going to be buildings sub 0 dot ID. So the ID of that building that's returned. And again, remember it's returning an array we know from before, so we just grab the first one, and they should be unique, so it should only be one. And we attach that ID to the apartments. And so we're going to create the apartment. We pass in our params. And so to make this chain continue, we have to return this. So return, this is all just syntax you'll get used to. And the response on that should be our new apartment. And we always catch our error. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to re-render our building page. And we just want to give, I'm not sure the scope of this building's here. I don't believe it makes it to the next part here, so I'm just going to say here. And so this is declared outside of the scope of this. So what we're going to do is you know what? I have a better idea. So what we're going to do is we're going to send the post, and then we're going to redirect to right here, which is going to allow us to fetch the building and all its associated properties. And now that the apartment's been created, we can fetch those too. So let's give this a try. And right now we're not rendering. Okay, so let's just give this a try. And what we want to do here is just log the apartment. So if we jump back to localhost here, 2 bed, 3 bath. Actually, I have the real stuff here. Now, let's create this. Building is not defined. Oh, typo. Alright, let's give that one more try. Oh, it looks like it's letting us resubmit our form. Okay, so the good news is our apartment was created right here. And if you see here, this building ID, that's the building ID that was given from the building page. So that's neat. So now it's tied to that building. The bad news is this did not work. So what we need to do here is kind of just a stupid mistake. Let's try that. This one. Alright, so what I'm expecting is to be redirected to this page. We're not rendering these apartments yet. That's going to be the last part before we tie this up, but at least now we fixed our dynamic redirect at the top. And if we check our logs here, we created that new apartment. So the last thing we need to do is kind of like, I think it'll all come together here, is, so remember this page is for the individual building here. So let's go back to our building page, our get request, right? Like when we refresh this, this is our get request. And what we want to do is, again, using a promise chain, here before we render, we need to do something else. So what we're going to do here is our last part is going to be to render the buildings. So, and again, we might have an issue here with scope, but we'll get to that. Okay, let's define this out here. We're going to fetch the buildings by slug, and when we get that building, again, it's an array, because we're doing it by the slug, not fetch one. What we want to do here is make sure to go fetch the apartments now. So I'm going to call, and remember we got to return, so this is going to be another one. Return turbo dot fetch, and this is going to be apartment, and we're going to query by this building's ID. So buildings sub 0. Oh, so our key is going to be by building, right? So if we look here, we want to search by building and pass in this ID. So building sub 0 dot ID, and apartments. So that should return all the apartments. Okay, so what we want to do is, when we get the first building, we're going to set building now to this building sub 0. And then when we get the apartments, we're going to take that same building and give it an apartment attribute, and it's going to be what was returned. And then here, we're just going to render that building, and we're not actually showing apartments right now, so we're just going to make a partial real quick. How are we doing on time? Alright, I'm not going to make a partial. We'll do that in the next video. We're just going to loop through the array of apartments if they exist. So let's go back to the building page. So here we have name, city, state. Let's just throw in a line break. And let's just say, again, bear with me here. Do I call apartments plural? building.apartments. So I'm going to iterate through those apartments, and no bed. No bath. Price. Alright, I would say there's about a 50% chance this works, but let's give it a try. And we're hanging up, which is not a good sign. Buildings is not defined at promise. Okay. So, sorry, I just passed in the wrong variable. Let's try it again. So on initial, I don't see any apartments here, and we think we have some, so it's probably not working. So let's throw a console log in right here, and then we're kind of halfway between our 2 points. And we can see is there something on the view side or on the data side. So these apartments came back, which is good. Building.apartments equals apartments. Building.apartments. Let me just check. I could probably just iterate it through my data. That wasn't even the right file. Sorry, that was really stupid. So let's just take all this and go to our building page and see if that does it. If it does, I will be very happy. Alright, sorry, I put in text here instead of the actual variable. So let's just refresh this. So we have our numbeds, numbath, price, availability, and here's the test. We want to create this, so I'm creating another apartment. It's going to be 4 bed, 2 bath, not available, price 3,100. Great, apt, and we want to see if this gets created. If so, it should show up right here. So that's pretty cool. And again, this probably doesn't seem as impressive without any styling or anything, but I kind of hope you see how it all fits together. I'll do a quick recap. So when we hit this slug here on our GET request, router.get building slug, we fetch our building from the server by that parameter, and then we pass in that data. It comes back in an array, so we have to grab building sub 0, and we pass that. Now we get the ID, and we search for all the apartments and see if any of them are tied to that ID. That was that one-to-many relationship. And then we take all of that data, and we give it to our view layer. In our view layer, we have this form that we submit to the same spot here, and it passes in all this data and makes the apartment. That's handled by our post request in our router. And what that does is it gets the body. Again, remember last time we were doing rec.params. Anytime it's a post, same idea, but it's rec.body. And before we can create anything, we need to fetch the building by that slug and get its ID. And when we create the apartment object, we put that ID in the building field. So now they're kind of tied. So if we go to our data store real quick, Turbo 360. We have the original building model, same as before. We had that slug spot, otherwise same. When we go to our apartments, they're created with this ID. So like this ID here, we go to the building. It's tied to this building now. So, I mean, it's pretty neat. That's basically kind of how I say that's the most common database relationship has many and belongs to, and it's pretty neat that we've created that, and they're kind of creating apartments dynamically tied to the buildings page they're created from. Again, that's probably something we'd want to restrict to an admin or remove at this point. We'll just block and let only admins edit and stuff, and because it's all tied in, I think that's what I'll do. Yeah, so I think that's it for now. I don't want to let this go any longer. I'm gonna kind of cut this off, but in our next video, we'll do some styling, and maybe we can. I want to do styling, and I want to do it so that these are editable, so we don't waste all the work we just did. I'm gonna make it an editable form that's restricted to the company's use, so they can go and change price, change availability, that kind of stuff, and make it look decent. And yeah, so that's it for now. It's been fun. I'll see you guys in the next video.